The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Head coach Pete Carroll is officially out as expected, but with that comes a lot more clarity.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
It became official pretty early on Monday. One, we all kind of anticipated it was going to happen. It was on Monday's show. I had talked about it at some point, depending on when you're listening to the show. Pete Carroll may already be on his way out. I didn't know how they were going to word it. I didn't know if it was going to be retirement, mutually part ways, or flat out fire. And I didn't think that they were going to flat out fire him, but I also understand that by the language and the way that you put it is based off how much money the head coach is going to get. So if they decided to, or he decided to retire, agree to that, or mutually part ways, I'm sure he wouldn't get his full contract. He had a 3-year deal. He gets that money that was on his contract that was still remaining by being fired. So the Raiders put out a statement pretty early on Monday. The Raiders have relieved Pete Carroll of his duties as head coach. We appreciate and wish him and his family all the best. Moving forward, General Manager John Spytek will lead all football operations in close collaboration with Tom Brady, including the search for the club's next head coach. Together, they will guide football decisions with a shared focus on leadership, culture, and alignment with the organization's long-term vision and goals. Okay. That was from Mark Davis. Again, that was a statement that was put out pretty early on Monday, and it's funny. I kind of was waking up periodically throughout the course of the night as I was trying to get a little bit of sleep, going into Monday morning, but knowing that some kind of statement like that could come down at any time. Apparently, Mark Davis, Tom Brady, and other powers that be worked feverishly throughout the night trying to get their ducks in a row and try to get everything together. The one thing I could really appreciate, this wasn't like it was last year when Antonio Pierce, if you remember, went out on a Monday following the game and talked to the media and told us that he expected to be head coach. We went into the locker room following that, talked to the players, and they didn't know what was going on, and we all kind of were looking at each other. And I remember looking at Deshaun Reed specifically and saying, well, maybe there's not going to be a head coaching search this summer. He's like, yeah, maybe it's going to be a little bit, not as exciting or, not as much work that we're going to have to do as anticipated. And then right after that, Antonio Pierce got fired. So I can appreciate the fact that the Raiders did, in fact, have a plan in place. It was a lot more buttoned up. There wasn't a whole bunch of leaks. And then all of a sudden, later on in the afternoon, a statement finally came out from the Raiders. By the time Shefty and Ian Rappaport put it out there, boom, that statement from Mark Davis that I just read was out there as well. The first part, that's kind of, cut and paste, right? The Raiders have relieved Pete Carroll of his duties and his head coach. We appreciate him and wish his family all the best. That's cut and paste. That's every statement when someone's relieved of their duties. But the rest of it is what caught my attention. Moving forward, General Manager John Spytek will lead all football operations in close collaboration with Tom Brady, including the search for the club's next head coach. Together, they'll guide football decisions with a shared focus on leadership, culture, and alignment within the organization's long-term vision and goals. That's what stood out to me the most from Mark Davis. And the reason that stood out to me is, one, it gave Tom Brady a role that we weren't sure what it was. There's been a lot of people that have speculated, oh, Tom Brady's in charge of this, he's in charge of that. No, he's not in charge of anything. Well, Mark Davis is letting you know right there, Tom Brady has a big say in what's going on. The pecking order that was the Raiders organization, and this is from a distance, it was Tom Brady, Pete Carroll kind of collaborating together, and then John Spytek. Now that Pete Carroll's out of the way, it's really Tom Brady and John Spytek. But as Mark Davis said, John Spytek, who's in the building every single day, will lead all football operations in collaboration with Tom Brady. And that's something that we'll talk about in segment number 2, that John Spytek let it be known that he talks to Tom Brady all the time. So those are the 2 guys in charge of football operations. Okay, so now whenever I do a radio hit on someone's station or a podcast or whatever, they say, Q, what's Tom Brady's role? Well, him and John Spytek are lead football operations, right? We know that now, right? We know that that's what their role is. But also, when it says together they'll guide football decisions with a shared focus on leadership, culture, and alignment with the organization's long-term vision and goals, lets you know what we've been talking about since about, week 4 of the regular season, that John Spytek, Pete Carroll, and everyone was not on the same page. And obviously Mark Davis is saying it has to be all together on the same page. They have to be aligned have the same long-term vision, have the same long-term goals. They didn't have the same long-term vision because Pete Carroll wasn't a long-term guy. Pete Carroll was a guy with a 3-year contract with a 4th year on the team option, right? And so he wanted to win right now, no matter what, right? Go ahead, sing that song. But no, he wanted to win right away. John Spytek understood that this was not a team that was going to win right away. Pete Carroll was going for 10 wins. Remember, hey, I don't win less than 10 games. I'm going to go win 10 games this year. Okay, John Spytek didn't really believe that. So you could see where the friction came in between those two, right? Also, the arranged marriage with Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator and all that obviously didn't help the process either at all. So now you're starting to understand where some of the decisions were made, like bringing in a Tyler Lockett. You know, even though he's a veteran wide receiver, he was a guy that obviously was brought in to help out Geno Smith. That makes a lot of sense. But he was brought in as a veteran, and that slowed down the growth of a Jack Bech or a Dante Thornton because, look, you can only have so many guys on the field at one time. There's only one ball. You can only have so many guys. They brought in Amari Cooper. I don't think anyone in the organization was excited about that outside of Pete Carroll. Obviously, that didn't work, but that was another veteran wide receiver. They need to get as much growth and as much chance to have growth from these young guys. And that's something that, you know, a lot of Raider Nation has been talking about throughout the course of the year, but Pete Carroll was really set in his ways and wasn't ready to play young guys until he was ready to play them, and he felt like they were ready to play. Some of that makes sense. Like Jack Bech still has a long ways to go. He has a lot of growth he still needs to do, right? Guys like Caleb Rogers, he admitted he wasn't ready early on, right? He knew he had some things he had to work on. Charles Grant, coming from William & Mary, obviously he's got some things he needs to work on, but a lot of folks are excited about those guys. You know, and then you see Tonka Hemingway having some success, J.J. Pegues having some success. So you're saying, okay, those are some guys that you could potentially build around, and obviously you have Ashton Genty. But that statement said a whole lot to me just about what was going wrong without saying what exactly went wrong, and also what direction they need to go without saying exactly what direction they need to go. But I will say this. The Raiders have the number 1 overall pick. They have 10 draft picks as of right now. They have an opening in the head coaching spot, and the new head coach that comes in has an opportunity to select their quarterback if they so want, right? You know, and the only negative for this job opening is there's no proof of patience. Right, we all know that the Raiders need to have patience. They need to exercise that. You can't hire a guy and then fire him. You can't keep this one-and-done type cycle up. It just is not going to work. You've got to be able to get a guy, be happy with that guy, and allow him to grow with that team and grow that team together and have that, you know, have that confidence that he's going to get it done. But obviously the move to move on from Pete Carroll had to happen, because they just were never aligned. And if they're not aligned, there's no reason to try to fit a square peg into a round circle, right? A round hole. It's not going to work, right? So that was the biggest issue moving forward. But there's 6 openings as of right now. There's still potential that there could be a surprise here or there. Raiders, Browns, Falcons, Cardinals, Giants, and Titans. And I would say that if the Raiders isn't right up there as one of the top attractive job openings in the league right now, it's got to be one of the top 2, top 3. I think the Giants is an attractive job just because they already have their quarterback in play. They do have a top 10 pick, right? They have some cap space that they can definitely continue to build, but they have a quarterback in place. They have Malik Neighbors there. They have some good weapons there. They have a defense that's already built. They need to get a guy that can lead the charge. So I think that's a good opening. The Titans, I don't think that they're sold on Cam Ward. I'm not too sure who is sold on Cam Ward, but the new potential head coach has to come in and like that guy and work with that guy. Obviously, the Giants do as well, but I think Jackson Dart has proved that he can be that guy where Cam Ward still has a lot of proof to do. The Cardinals job, I don't think that that's a very attractive job. The Falcons, they don't even have a first-round pick. They don't have very much salary cap space. They have questions at their quarterbacks. Michael Penix is injured, right, again, and Kirk Cousins doesn't want to be there because he wants to be a starter. The Browns, it's the Browns. They have a really good defense. Myles Garrett is a generational talent, but they've got a lot of questions, no quarterback. And then the Raiders. So I think that there is a lot to like about the Raiders' position, and it will be attractive for many different head coaching potentials. And, of course, we'll definitely deep dive into some of those guys. We don't need to do that right away, right? It's still the very early stages. The Raiders are still trying to figure some things out. They actually made a handful of future signings, and we'll go over those at a later time as well. But they made a handful of those little signings on Monday, official as well. But it's a new time. It's a new generation. It's a new I should say chapter, not generation, but new chapter of Raider football, and it's going to be led by John Spytek and Tom Brady.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Kevin Stefanski is out as the Browns head coach.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
The Browns parted ways with Kevin Stefanski on Monday after a 5-12 season, 8-26 over the last 2 seasons. But the failures of the organization run deeper than just him. Plus, Andrew Berry is staying. He will lead the search for a new head coach. What is he looking for? We'll play you a clip. We'll talk about which philosophically direction the Browns should go. And Jim Schwartz may just be a candidate that should be getting a pretty good look here to replace Kevin Stefanski. We'll talk about it all with you. I do want to thank you for being on every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, of course, now the #1 sports podcast network, and it's all thanks to you. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And it was officially done on Monday. The news that we were all kind of anticipating, Kevin Stefanski relieved of his duties as head coach of the Cleveland Browns, came down early Monday morning, sort of as anticipated. Team held a, I guess not the team, but there was a meeting of the minds between Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski. They discussed the future and decided that it was best at this time to part ways with Kevin Stefanski. And what this all comes down to ultimately is just results. And I've said it numerous times on this podcast. Like, in the NFL, it is a results-based business. Your career as a coach, as a GM, it's ultimately made by what you do on the field, what the team does on the field, and how they produce for you. And early on, it looked like Kevin was turning this thing around. I do think he established a better culture here than what's been here in the 20-plus years prior. There were positive signs and steps. But when push came to shove, 2 seasons where you win just 8 games, your offense looks inept, which was his side of the ball. It was too much to overcome, and he's ultimately the one who ends up on the chopping block here. Now, there's reasons I don't think that it's fair that it just falls on his lap or falls to his lap. But I do want to play you first what Jimmy Haslam said in relation to the reasons why. And this was kind of his message to the fans, but in it, he explains why this move is happening and the motivations kind of behind it.
First of all, ownership takes full responsibility for where we are. To win 8 games in 2 years is horrible. It's totally unacceptable, okay? And it's not going to continue, okay? And I want the fans to know we are as frustrated as you are.
Well, it's not going well for me, so we'll just save you the skipping video there, and I'll explain that basically, to surmise what he said, it was essentially what I alluded to. The idea that ownership takes full blame for the failures of this organization right now, the losing that's gone on over the years, and that he vowed to be better. And, you know, what's interesting about that is I think it's a spiel that Browns fans have heard before through all the different coaching hires and cycles and all those different situations that have played out over Jimmy Haslam's tenure here since he bought the team in 2012. You know, it's a pretty common speech that he's given in terms of trying to get this thing going in the right direction, and he hasn't been able to get there yet. The problems persist, if you will, for this team and for this organization. And so because of that, I think people doubt the true motivations behind it and doubt whether or not he's actually going to see the vision through and it's going to come to fruition. And part of that, I think, does start with the fact that firing Stefanski, was it warranted? I feel like the answer is yes, because like I said, when you're a coach in this league, you know what you sign up for. And I think Kevin understands that as well as he's on the way out here. The idea that when you put back-to-back losing seasons together, how could possibly anybody how could you possibly be safe in that scenario? You're not guaranteed anything in this league. Nobody is. And you are what your record says you are, right? So I think understanding that, it's fair that he was somebody who was in question and that the evaluation process sort of lent itself to to feel like it was time to make a change of coach. I'm not saying that they didn't need to make a change of coach, but what I am saying is stopping at Stefanski only feels like a half measure to fix the organization and get this thing back on track. Because as I said, the problems that exist with this franchise right now go well beyond Stefanski. They go well beyond Sundays on the football field. They go well beyond things that Kevin Stefanski had control over. I think that's fair to say. And like, look at the roster construction, right? And what's interesting is, like, Jimmy Haslam touted these different elements of the organization that were Andrew Berry's responsibility as for why Andrew is still here. I think this is important. He touted the draft class, of course. We knew that was going to be part of the answer. He touted the Malik Collins signing and how pivotal and important Malik Collins was to this team's success this year on the football field before he got hurt. He touted the trade on draft night that got you some draft capital for this season. He touted the Tyson Campbell trade. He even brought Andre Schmidt into the equation and talked about how Andre Schmidt's progression through the season and how he, seemed to solidify the kicking spot is something that it, helped Andrew in terms of feeling like he made some legitimate changes to this organization and the roster and the players that are here. And I can understand all those things. I can see where he's coming from with all those things. I'm not saying he's wrong in feeling like, Barry's made some acquisitions over the last year that are positive and show positive steps and progress for the organization. That's a fair thing to say. But does it mask the 5 years prior of misses in drafts and the massive holes that exist on this roster that have been neglected or been, as Jimmy Haslam called the Deshaun Watson trade, swings and misses at other positions that led to the record and the ultimate results that we saw on the field this year? I just can't forgive all those previous years of roster construction flaws and the inability to address certain things, because I can't have that masked by just, well, hey, he had a really good 2025 in terms of how he managed this roster. I can't wrap my head around that. I think it's a half measure. I think it speaks of an organization that's afraid maybe to go all in on tearing it down from organizationally and starting new, and they want to have, I guess, like some sense of a direction in terms of leading the search and what's kind of to come from here. I guess I can't speak fully for Jimmy Haslam on that, but I just, again, can't. I'm not. A change was needed. I think we can all agree on that, but for the change to stop at just Kevin Stefanski, it does feel like he's getting scapegoated or falling on the sword or is the sacrificial lamb. Whatever phrase you want to use to describe it, it certainly comes off that way because, like I said, like the problems with this team are vast and they go well beyond the things that Kevin Stefanski was dealing with on a day-to-day.
Jonathan Gannon's out. Michael Bidwell actually did it.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast.
News dropped about an hour ago. Jonathan Gannon's out. Assuming that we're not going to see Nick Rallis and Drew Petzing either, for those that wanted the rational flush out of the current regime, you got it. There's so many questions now as to what the next steps are. Final segment, what does it mean for Kyler Murray? It's fascinating because I didn't think he was going to get fired, Jonathan Gannon, even though, conventional wisdom would lend you to think that he would. What does it mean for Kyler Murray? Second, what are the positives from last year? Okay? What are the positives from this past season? There were some, and I was going to talk about the game yesterday, but ain't nothing to talk about. The head coach is gone. So the interesting thing, as Jonathan Gannon is out, is say what you want about Michael Bidwell, and trust me, I've said plenty. I think he is not the best human being. We know by the ongoing allegations of things of workplace misconduct and all that stuff, but this is a football show, so I'm sticking to football. I didn't know that Michael Bidwell had this type of backbone. And you could mock that, sure, and say, well, it's a big deal firing a 3-14 head coach. Wow, real backbone. No. Let's look at the big picture here. There was 2 years left on his deal. Everybody loved him inside the locker room. And they're not going to draft a quarterback this year. So those three things, and the entire team was injured. So those three things would be like, all right, well, yeah, quote unquote, lame duck, sure. Coach for your job, sure. But he said, you know what? This is it. I'm sorry everybody was injured, but the way things happened down the stretch was undeniably unacceptable, especially for a defensive-minded head coach giving up 40 burgers left and right. And then 35, 37 points in other games. So there's going to be so much time to talk about who could be the next head coach. There are plenty of suitors. And I'll tell you what, after these playoffs, there may be more. Drop a 1 in the chat if you're surprised that he got fired. Not if you wanted him to get fired, but if you're surprised that Michael Bidwell actually fired him. Drop a 1 in the chat. Because here's the thing. I was shocked. Not because it's not warranted. Not because, everything was pointing to him being fired. And I get that. You're not giving Michael Bidwell all this credit for doing something that was seemingly easy to do. I get that. But also, there was one thing. Injuries. Okay? That was it. So if that was strong enough, he would have come back. There was way too much other than that. Every metric guided this decision. like truly, like every football metric. They put all this money into the defense. And while, one of my reasons, or I guess excuses, for why the defense wasn't playing well this year was because it wasn't one major wave of injuries where you have 5 guys out for 3 or 4 weeks. It was just every week it was somebody else to get any sort of momentum with the syncopation of, this guy out, then this guy out, then this guy back, then this guy out. It was difficult. But what I think, especially there's 6 head coaching positions open right now. Like outside of maybe Atlanta and Vegas with the number 1 overall pick and Tom Brady, this roster, I don't know why this roster gets so much crap talked about it. I guess because of the wins and losses. But this just opens up so many more possibilities. And for those who don't know, Monty Ossenfort is staying pat, as well he should. Monty Ossenfort is drafted by the book better than we've seen in forever. And the injuries have just, it's been insane. But thanks everybody for hanging out. I haven't done a live full show in a while, but obviously this couldn't wait. You kind of feel bad for the guy. Sure, he'll land on his feet. He'll get a DC job somewhere and probably another head coaching job at some point. I think he was set up to fail in a situation as this. Every young, successful head coach in this league of late has had that Yoda or whatever, that old-ass offensive or defensive coordinator who can kind of be their rock going into their first couple seasons. And Jonathan Gannon didn't have that. He had no safety net. And that's, choosing your own coaching staff, whatever, sometimes arranged marriages are better with coaching staffs, especially for a first-time head coach. Doesn't matter what Jonathan Gannon did do for this team. And irrespective of record, irrespective of everything else, and the fact that he wasn't a very good head coach when it came down to it, you've got to give him credit for the shift in culture. And I know that this is something I've talked about so much that everybody's talked about. This isn't original to me. The dysfunction between the lines did not bleed anywhere else. And that's new. That's a new thing. Jonathan Gannon brought cohesion with this team that we hadn't seen in the last regime. He wasn't respected. Jonathan Gannon was. And regardless of how much and how far that will go, I don't know. It's just factual at this point in my humblest of humble opinions. And, I've already been asked, my phone's been blowing up. It's like, well, why did you fire him mid-season? Didn't have to. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe Michael Bidwell didn't know. I thought that he knew week 11, week 12, he was bringing him back. It's like, well, listen, let's just limp to the finish line here. Hopefully nobody gets hurt even more than they already are. And, we'll run it back fresh. maybe the 40 burger punch and the 40 burger punch of Seattle and the 49ers, and then Houston, and then, the Rams put up 37. It's like, geez, where's the fight? Regardless of who's hurt and who's not. The Jonathan Gannon tenure will be looked at as a failure. And it should. I also guaranteed they beat the Titans. That's true. Good call, Sean. You want my condo? It's not very nice. What he did outside the lines is something that you can take away from this as kind of a consolation prize. What this roster will look like, what everything else will look like, that's something that we will discuss later. There's so many things that you can be, we just got to kind of sit in this for a second, because this opens up everything. This opens up quite literally everything. I did not see this coming. I did not think Michael Biddle was going to pull the trigger. And I did not think that we'd be sitting here on Black Monday and say, wow, the Cardinals are going to be in the coaching carousel search again.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Kevin Durant calls game against the Suns, and the Rockets defense steps up when it matters most. 197 final score. And man, this was absolutely a game of runs. Like, it felt like, Rockets have a run, then the Suns have a run, Rockets have a run, Suns have a run. And Rockets got the last laugh because they had the final run, if you will. This game, first off, the Rockets defense in the second half of this one was next level, holding the Suns to 18 in the third and just 19 in the fourth quarter. But this was a game, the Rockets were actually leading this game 94-87 about midway through the fourth quarter. With 6:04 left in the fourth, Jabari hits a free throw to give the Rockets a 7-point lead. And over the next 4 minutes and some change, Rockets had some solid defensive possessions, but they just could not buy a bucket offensively. Like, they played some solid overall. You hold any team to less than 20 points in a quarter, you're playing some great defense, but the Rockets defense did have some slips. The Suns made some buckets, and they sprung back out and had a 97-94 lead. And in the midst of that little 10-0 run that the Suns went on was a really egregious sequence where Devin Booker gets to the free throw line, makes the first one, misses the second one. Oso Ighodaro gets the offensive rebound. It finds its way back to Devin Booker. He cans a three-pointer. They get a 4-point play off of that one possession. They're down one. Booker comes down, Brooks comes down, hits a fadeaway. Booker hits a couple more free throws, and before you know it, Rockets go from leading by 7 to trailing by 3 with just under 2 minutes to go. And from this point on, Rockets only hit 2 more buckets. With just under 2 minutes to go, Amin Thompson has this ridiculous left to right, slicing crossover through 2 defenders, absorbs contact, finishes right at the rim, gets the and one. He was just perfect from the charity stripe, 7 of 7 in this game. Great job by him in getting downhill. And then the Rockets pitch an absolute shutout the rest of the way. The final 2 minutes and some change, after allowing that 10-0 Phoenix run to regain the lead, the Rockets held the Suns scoreless over the final 2 minutes and 12 seconds, basically, of the game. And there were a couple, it wasn't just like good, like these weren't just good defensive possessions. These were Rockets had not one, but 2 different 24-second shot clock violations in that final stretch of game. None more important than the possession where it was tied up 97 all And it was basically the final Suns possession of the game, 29 seconds on the clock. And Tari Eason D'ing up against Devin Booker guarded him about as perfectly as one could do. It was like he was trying to set himself up for the same exact game-winning shot, game-winning three that he hit against the OKC Thunder the night before. But instead, Tari Eason guards it beautifully. Booker doesn't even make it behind the three-point line. Like Tari anticipates the little chest bump that Booker likes, or the little shoulder bump that Booker likes to do, guards it beautifully, doesn't undercut him, doesn't foul him, forces him to a tough contested 20-foot fadeaway. And Booker doesn't even draw iron, right? Straight glass, 24-second violation. Rockets get the ball back with 5.1 on the clock. And who else but Kevin Wayne Durant showing up, ice in his veins, to knock down the game-winning three-pointer. Rockets call timeout. They inbound the ball to KD. And this was one of the few moments that we've seen this season where the Rockets were just, look, this is what you got KD for, right? You got Kevin Durant for these moments. And so for the Rockets to be able to just identify, hey, get the ball to KD, we're going to live with whatever the outcome is, right? And KD walked it up. There was no immediate double team, no blitz to try and get the ball out of his hands. He walked right into that right wing three-pointer, dribbled directly into his pull-up three, bang, only his second three-pointer of the game. He was just 2 for 12 in this one. He was saying in his post-game interview that he kept telling the guys, he was like, I feel it, like one's going to drop, it's going to drop, it's going to drop. And he just kept trying, and he hit the biggest shot of the night with 1.1 second left on the clock. I swear it is absurd watching a future first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest to ever do it, hit big shot after big shot in a Rockets jersey. It is really cool to witness. And then the Rockets, there was still 1.1 seconds left on the clock. Still a chance for the Suns, but who else other than also former Phoenix Sun Josh Okogie to come in and get the final defensive stop of that sequence. Suns try to inbound the ball to Booker, and Okogie had this play sniffed out like he was a free safety, just jumped the passing lane, got two hands on the ball, and was like falling out of bounds with it as he caught it. And Booker wrestled it away from him, but had to reach down and snatch it away from him at his ankles, basically, and then turn and just throw a prayer up at the rim that really didn't have a chance of going in. So shout out to Josh Okogie, Tari Eason, and Josh Okogie for the two biggest defensive plays of this game. Rockets held the Suns scoreless. Kevin Durant, ice in his veins, biggest shot of the night to give Houston the win. And look, it's phenomenal watching this Rockets defense getting back to a place where they can rely on their defense to win them games, right? Even when the offense was kind of yucky at times, this was one of the closest wins that we've had to last season's Rockets, to the 24-25 version of this team, where they could get you some ugly defense first wins. And that's exactly what happened in this game. The Rockets offense was not pretty in this one. Kevin Durant, just 9 of 21 shooting. That's not good efficiency for KD, right? Across the entire board for the Rockets, poor efficiency throughout the lineup, throughout the entire rotation, but it didn't matter. The Rockets hit the big shots. They hit more tough shots than the Suns did down the stretch of this game, and their defense stepped up when they needed it most. They've got Kevin Durant, who's a pretty good cheat code at the end of games, and despite being 1 for 11 going into that final shot, he hit the biggest shot of the night. Awesome win, quality win against a quality Phoenix Suns team, coming off of a huge win against the OKC Thunder in their own right. Just unreal stuff. Hearing the MVP chants after the game for KD was nuts as well, and it left us with this amazing interview question from Rockets courtside reporter Vanessa Richardson.
What's it like to hear everybody at Toyota Center chanting MVP?
Being booed in here so many years, being an opposing player and being booed, it feels good to come out here and get some love. I love Houston. I love Texas. I'm just grateful and representing the Rockets.
An incredible quote from KD and a great way to cap off an awesome Rockets win against a very good Phoenix Suns team. A game-winning three-pointer by Kevin Durant against his former squad. I know Ben Garcia asked for mercy, but hell no, Ben.
Release the hounds.
Go swing by Locked On Suns. Tell them Locked On Rockets sent you by. We love flooding the comment section of opposing teams. Go do that right now. Go head on over to Locked On Suns. Tell them the hounds coming by. All right. Elsewhere in this game, look, this game early on, especially like the overall game flow of this one, the Suns were just absolutely on fire early in this game from three. They couldn't miss. They shot 7 of 13 from long distance in the first quarter alone. Like the 3-point shooting for the Suns just fell off a cliff. It felt like they couldn't miss anything in the first quarter. They finished the game. They went 7 of 13 in the first quarter. They finished their game shooting the rest of the way 7 for 25. Wait, 7 for 25? That's not the right math. 7 for 28? It's even worse. Yeah, it was bad. Like the Suns 3-point shooting just completely cratered after that first quarter. But it felt like they were going to have one of those nights where opposing team just flat out could not miss against the Rockets. And it was a weird, like, early going, right? Like, Suns jumped out to an early 7-2 lead. Then the Rockets went on their little run. Then the Suns went on another little run. It really did feel like a game of total runs. And shout out to what the hell with the early game clock issues, man. I'll tell you what, whether that was some home cooking to stop Jordan Goodwin, who looked like he was about to torch the Rockets for 30 after hitting 3 straight triples in the first quarter. No idea what all that was about, but the clock issues in Toyota Center, I've never seen anything like it. It was one of the weirdest set of circumstances in this game, and I had it logged right here. There were 6 clock malfunctions in the first quarter alone. Then there was another clock malfunction at the top of the second quarter. Then there was a long stoppage of play while they were trying to figure out the clocks. Then they came back, had another clock malfunction. So if you're counting, we're up to 8 clock malfunctions at this point. And then they played the rest of the second half without a working clock. Like, it was nuts. Shout out to the real MVP of the game, Rockets PA announcer Jonathan Sanford, who was on the PA address system acting as the shot clock, like announcing how much time was left in the quarter, announcing 15 seconds, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, 6, like doing countdowns, that whole thing. I've never once seen anything like that happen in an NBA game. I've seen them break out like the on the court shot clocks before, like setting them up in the corners to where they're not above the basket, like old school style. I've never seen that happen because the clock wasn't working. Thankfully, they got it fixed in the second half, but that was just a level of absurdity that I've never even personally experienced during an NBA game. That was kind of nuts to live and experience. But yeah, so that like, weirdly enough, the clock malfunctions actually probably played to the Rockets' favor. Like, the Suns were so unconscious from 3 in the first quarter of this game that like dead period probably like iced out the Suns a little bit to where, I mean, Jordan Goodwin was not the same after that first quarter, right? Royce O'Neal calmed down a little bit. He still wound up shooting 5 for 12 for the game, but it completely iced out the Suns shooters after that insanely hot first quarter that they had. So maybe a little bit of home cooking by the Rockets stadium crew, unplug some wires and don't plug them back in until the second half once the Suns are good and cold. No, I kid. But credit to Toyota Center staff for getting that thing up and running for the second half. Credit to Space City Home Network too for like trying to keep the score bug updated, like I think manually at one point in time. Like they were just like manually updating the graphic. It was kind of a cluster to watch them go through. But this game, it really felt like, the Rockets lived through the hot shooting of the Suns in that first half. And then as the second half got here, I mean, just even starting the second half, like right out of the gate, it felt like there was a bit more defensive energy, a little bit more defensive intensity coming out of halftime. And this was a game that had some chippiness. And I think that there was a stretch in this game where it had a chance to go really sideways. And it was really early. Top of the third quarter, Rockets went down 67-56. They went down 11. They went down multiple times by double digits, right? They went down by 13 at one point later in the game as well. But go down by 11, and then you had multiple, like it was 3 or 4 really sloppy, lazy, undisciplined turnovers, and that still continues to be the Achilles heel for this Rockets team. And it was compounded by the fact like they had the couple lazy turnovers, and then they had an 8-second violation coming out of a timeout. Like that is borderline a benchable offense. Like if it hadn't been Kevin Durant who committed the 8-second violation, like that's a borderline offense that you get benched for. And you're like, hey, think about what the hell you just did, right? Lock in. Amin Thompson wound up the Rockets went on this like little spurt, this little run right after that period of lack of focus where they got some Amin Thompson free throws. He was getting downhill. Then you had a transition 3-pointer for Jabari Smith Jr. that was fed by Tari Eason, where the Rockets they were getting stops. They were getting out and running, right? They were moving faster. And then there was another transition play, a pass from Amin Thompson, I believe, that led to a Kevin Durant dunk in transition. And that brought the score back within a 2-possession game, 69-63. So that was another like little important stretch, a little important run that the Rockets went on where things could have gone really sideways right there at the top of the third quarter, but the Rockets stayed locked in. They were able to persevere, get through that stretch, and not let the game, get out of hand and let the Suns like run up the score and get a really big lead on them.
NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Trinidad Chambliss is staying home at Ole Miss, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll be coming back to play.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels.
We're talking about Trinidad Chambliss inking a new deal with the Ole Miss Rebels, effectively ending all the speculation of him going to LSU. But the story doesn't necessarily end there. This waiver still has to go through the NCAA. And as Rebel fans know too well, that process can bring plenty of anxiety. We'll explain what to expect and why it isn't a done deal just yet. We'll also take a look at where Ole Miss stands with Kewan Lacey. Spoiler alert, it's very good. And what that means for the offense moving forward. And finally, we will turn our attention to the Fiesta Bowl and break down the challenge that is facing Ole Miss against a talented Miami team. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, your team every day. And I did not change that. Trinidad Chambliss re-upped with the Ole Miss Rebels, signed an NIL deal. He is going to come back to Ole Miss if his waiver gets accepted. Now, make no mistake, this is leading off the podcast. This is huge news because if he comes back to Ole Miss next year, he is a leading Heisman Trophy candidate if his waiver gets accepted. We talked about back during the season when nobody else was saying, when everybody else was pretending this was a Diego Pavia type thing. I was like, no, this is just him applying for a 6th year of eligibility the same way that people did 15 years ago. This is a medical hardship case. And we found out a little bit later on that case stems from the fact that he had some respiratory problems and mono or something like that, ended up having to get his tonsils taken out. That cost a whole season. Ole Miss is applying on Trinidad's behalf for a waiver for that 6th year with 91 pages of documentation. At first, it was reported, and it was reported in multiple spots, that the NCAA was not likely to grant that waiver, and they were kind of dragging their feet. I genuinely think, this is just my opinion, that the NCAA didn't want Trinidad Chambliss going to LSU. It didn't want that to happen. They didn't want the optics of what was going on in Baton Rouge to continue and be amplified by getting a Q1 Lacy and a Trinidad Chambliss and those guys because of what is going on. I genuinely believe that is the case. But now, since he has inked an NIL deal with Ole Miss and he is not going anywhere, we'll see if this happens and he is able to get that waiver. Just in case, he has retained the services of renowned NCAA fighter. I guess we can put him in that category, NCAA fighter, Tom Mars, who is a Badger. If all the Ole Miss fans that remember when Tom Mars was retained by Houston Nutt, how he went after Ole Miss and how he was essentially a bulldog, no pun intended. But Tom Mars is doing the same thing now on Trinidad's behalf. And I think I saw some kind of tweet yesterday where Tom Mars is like, oh, you hated me for what I did before. You love me what I'm doing now. And you hate that I'm putting this. No, we only like you if you're doing our interest. All the other stuff we don't care about. This isn't a personal thing. It is just do what you're supposed to do for our interest. And that's all we care about. Trinidad Chambliss would be in our interest. And if you look at him, seriously, in 2026, if Trinidad Chambliss is back, he is the front runner for the Heisman Trophy. Ole Miss is a top 5 team. Everything's in place for Ole Miss to go on another run. Sure, you're going to lose some wide receivers. I think Deshaun Stribling could be gone. I think Trey Wallace could be gone. And there could be some transfers like Winnie Watkins that head out the door as well. But one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, I want to see Caleb Cunningham play in an expanded role. He got to Ole Miss late, was a little bit behind the 8 ball, but he was able to make a catch and you could see the talent. He is somebody that can line up and be a 1-for-1 spot for Deshaun Stribling. Period. You have Deuce Alexander who could go, who could not go. I've heard rumors both ways on that. I think Winston Watkins is gone. He was one, if you remember correctly, whenever Lane was campaigning for coaching to the playoffs, he was one of the players that was kind of gotten on his side. So I don't know the numbers going to LSU are going to be very high, but what I do know is that it's not going to include Trinidad Chambliss, and it's looking like it's not going to include Q1 Lacy. It's a bad day for LSU because everybody that assumed that all of these great players were heading that direction, that doesn't look like it's the case. Trinidad Chambliss, though, if he gets his waiver, which there were reports yesterday, I don't know if it was Dellinger or Pete Thamel or those guys, it was in the national sphere, said that they feel pretty good about getting the waiver, and that's the Chambliss family feeling pretty good getting the waiver. Tom Mars, part of it central to his argument is not granting the year of eligibility to Trinidad Chambliss would cause irreparable harm and cost him millions of dollars. Now there's an exact number that they would cost them. This signing could be a little bit of a PR stunt to get the waiver, but all it does is just going to ensure that Trinidad Chambliss ends up at Ole Miss. He's a really good quarterback, as everybody is seeing. And his play, the 3 plays in a row stretch at the start of the 4th quarter against the Georgia Bulldogs, I don't think any Ole Miss fan will forget. It is one of those moments that you're like, man, I know exactly where I was when that happened. There's very few of those events that happen in Ole Miss's history to just stands out, just burns those powerful memories into your soul. And that start of that 4th quarter with the 3 scrambles leading to a 4-yard shovel pass type thing to Q1 Lacy. Then the next pass was all the Archie Manning scramble, first down, Q1 Lacy, and then the deep pass to Trey Wallace. Trinidad Chambliss is pretty close to cementing himself as the best quarterback that has ever played at Ole Miss. 2 wins away. If he wins those 2 games against the Miami Hurricanes and the winner of Oregon and Indiana, I don't know if there's any argument that Trinidad is the best quarterback that Ole Miss has ever had. Ever had. I'm not saying he's the best NFL scout. I'm not saying he's the best runner. He's the best quarterback. A position currently held by Eli Manning, by the way. But Trinidad taking care of things. If he can get the win against the Miami Hurricanes, first of all, if he gets the win against the Miami Hurricanes, I'm likely heading down to Miami for the national championship game, working through my parent company to get a media credential for the game, have backups in place. I will find a way to catch the bullet train and get down to Miami. But Ole Miss needs to take care of business Thursday night first. It's going to be a very, very big deal if Ole Miss can pull off what we all assume that they can pull off. If we're going to be real about it, what they can pull off. So we'll see how it looks. That's a nasty defensive line that Trinidad is going to go up against in this Miami game. That front 7 for Miami is real. And just like I said back in August, Ole Miss will go as far as the front 7 will take them. That is absolutely the case in this game. Mark Fletcher is going to be a major key to see what could happen.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast.
Pretty wild. I found, the warning here was fired by Will Compton, none other than Will Compton, who, as you all probably have a pretty keen understanding at this point, he has a direct line to the coach,
Right.
The wording that he
used,
like
Matt Rule dropped a little rant on Will or something.
Yeah. The wording that he used was Kenny Minchie just bleeped Nebraska, a word that starts with an F. He committed, was supposed to visit tomorrow. Agent had paperwork, said he was signing. Kentucky hit him with a blank check. Lack of honor and spine led him to switch before signing the contract, and the agent complied. There you go. So that feels like it's that feels like it's Nebraska's point of view at this moment.
Yeah, I think Nebraska is not happy about what happened with Kenny Minchie. We'll talk about that in a minute. The reasons why Nebraska is not happy and what it can do, what it will do in this situation. But first, as promised, our portal headlines, as we will do every show now through the end of next week. Kenny Minchie is gone. Nebraska is without a quarterback commit in this portal class as of this moment here as we record this on Tuesday morning. Owen Chambliss, the linebacker who was a key piece of the San Diego State defense for Rob Orich, is in as a commitment to Nebraska on Monday. And so is Brendan Black, an offensive guard, 3-year starter at Iowa State. So Nebraska loses one commitment, its first commitment, a big one, the quarterback that stands above all else, and it gains 2 commitments. And then to the portal, Willis McGahee IV, who was a important piece as a freshman for Nebraska, a true freshman who showed great promise in 2024 and then fell off a bit in 2025. Did not have the kind of beginning to the season, did not have really the training camp that Nebraska was expecting from him, and he ended up playing in fewer than 5 games, so a red shirt taken by Willis McGahee IV, which then led him to go to the portal as of Monday. So let's start this thing with Minchie, and it happened fast because on Monday afternoon, Nebraska was in celebration mode, you might say, or it was certainly in like feel good mode that the quarterback was in the bag and he was ready to sign. He was committed. Like portal recruiting is not like high school recruiting, or we didn't think it was, where you have these flips at the last minute. Like generally when a player from the portal commits to a school, that player then signs with the school. But if you want to take Will Compton at his word that Kentucky came with a blank check, like he may have increased his earnings by $1 million. And I'm sorry, but who can blame somebody for going where the money is? Like Kenny Minchie didn't owe anything to Nebraska. He didn't have to come to Nebraska. Like honor in this situation, like that's out the window. This is like these guys are just, they're free agents. They're renegades. And until they sign contracts, you can do whatever you want. It's going to make people feel bad, but Nebraska's been on the other side of that, whether it's in recruiting or in the portal. Kentucky has a new head coach. He is coaching Oregon's offense, coordinating Oregon's offense right now. Will Stein headed to Kentucky. He pulled something out here, pulling double duty this week as he works with two teams, and Kentucky, which lost its quarterback, a freshman from last season, to Arizona State via the portal, now is the benefactor as Nebraska feels the pain in the portal. So,
all right, yeah. So let's do this. Let's use, these are relatively vague terms, numbers, figures, stuff like that. But you know, if Nebraska had Kenny Minchie around in the neighborhood of, let's just make it square, let's just say $1 million. They were going to pay him $1 million to be their quarterback.
Sure, we can
year.
say that.
First of all, already, you know, a third of what Dylan Raiola was doing. So Nebraska feeling good about that, right? So let's say $1 million. And then Kentucky came in and said, let's, you know, should we make it 2? Should we make it more than that, or something like that? First of all, how crazy is Kentucky to say that to a person who has never started, you know, any college football games before? That's pretty crazy. And then this is the thing that I want to talk about. How crazy would it in turn be then for Nebraska to then, you know, stay competitive in that for that one person who, once again, has not played before, has not started a college football game before, to compete there and say, hey, all right, well, we'll pay you $2.5 million. We'll pay you $3 million to be our quarterback. They would have to be double as
It would
crazy.
be crazy.
Yeah,
it would be crazy, and
it's crazy to do that.
It would be a sign that your portal spending was off the rails, that your actions as a program in that moment were spinning out of control. At the same time, Nebraska needs a quarterback. Nebraska has TJ Lateef.
There's a lot of people with the same resume as Kenny Minchie out there. A lot of them.
I think when you're dealing with this situation where you have a commitment from a quarterback and it's been one day, and that's essentially your entire tie to that player. It's not like Kenny Minchie has been at Nebraska for a year, and all of a sudden the situation changes and you lose him. You immediately just have to move on and say, all right, well, we're done with that. Like, there's no mourning the loss of Kenny Minchie here. Like, we knew you for 24 hours. So I'm sorry, but it's over. And Nebraska is now in a more desperate position. Like, we've heard from Matt Rule through the whole process of paying players and NIL and rev share that the desperate team sets the market. Well, Kentucky was a desperate team in this situation, because Cutter Boley, who threw for 2,160 yards and 15 touchdowns as a freshman for the Wildcats in 2025, went out the door when Mark Stoops was fired at Kentucky. And as I mentioned, he landed at Arizona State. So Kentucky was more desperate than Nebraska, apparently, in this spot, and was willing to pay Kenny Minchie, the quarterback who's never started a game in his 3 years at Notre Dame, more money than what Nebraska was willing to pay him. So where does Nebraska go from here? Because that's what matters in this situation. It's not crying over the loss of Minchie. Like, you get to get over that. Like, it's a new day. It's Tuesday, and Nebraska's moving forward. And maybe Nebraska gets a quarterback today on Tuesday. Like, if this thing starts to drag and you go into next week and you're still without a QB as you're putting together the portal class, and the closing of the portal is bearing down on you, like it's January 16th when this thing closes, then you become more and more desperate each day. But like, where's Nebraska at today with what it needs to do at this position?
I would say square one. I would say, you're considering how quickly the Minchie thing came together, and how it was, those two sides were obviously tied right off the bat when the portal opened. It felt like maybe that was the direction Nebraska had planned on heading for some time.
Yeah, it might have taken a couple weeks for that to come together,
and therefore was not was not experiencing other things on this great ride that we call the quarterback carousel. So back to square one, I think, where there are a lot of options. I don't think it's anything to panic over. It is a difficult loss in that sense. And you were kind of, at least thinking about the season and thinking about other players that you were going to add with him in the fold. And I think they think obviously he's a talented player. But they'll end up with some of the names that you've heard, DJ Lagway, which I would not be in support of, Aiden Childs, which would be fine, and Anthony Calandria from UNLV, who had some pretty good stats last year. I don't know much about him because I haven't seen him play much.
Those are early names that came out in a report on Husker Online on Monday night. I think there'll be some other names that pop in this search to replace Kenny Minchie or whatever. Just like cut Kenny Minchie's name out of the whole thing. This search for Nebraska to find a quarterback in the 2026 portal. It might happen. It could happen very fast, or Nebraska needs to find somebody by the end of this week, and it needs to get done. And Nebraska now is likely going to have to pay more. The three quarterbacks that you just mentioned, they all have starting experience. Calandria was, if I'm not mistaken, the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year this season at UNLV. So if you're going to go out and get a starter with experience under his belt, you're probably going to have to pay more than what Nebraska wanted to do for a quarterback in this spot. Maybe that changes what you have to do in going to get a third quarterback, because that's always been the plan, to have three quarterbacks on scholarship going into the moving forward after January 20th. So it's a curveball, no doubt.